You fall asleep on a camping trip, tent zipped, forest humming around you. Somewhere out there, something with claws and a nose built for smelling blood from a mile away is awake, and yet you wake up in the morning, completely fine. But the real answer to why that happens is far stranger than predators just avoid people. Because predators don't actually avoid you the way you might think. The truth is more complicated, more historical, and honestly, a little more unsettling. It involves fire. It involves your ancestors' sleep patterns, and it involves a defense system so quiet you've probably never noticed it working. This is the story of how your species survived the most vulnerable hours of its existence, night after night for hundreds of thousands of years, without ever fully losing the fight against the dark. Start with an uncomfortable fact: sleep is dangerous. Biologically speaking, it's one of the strangest behaviors in the entire animal kingdom because it requires an animal to become almost completely defenseless on purpose. Muscles relax, awareness drops, reaction time slows dramatically. For a species without claws, without powerful jaws, without thick natural armor, sleep should be an enormous liability. And for a huge portion of early human history, it absolutely was. Here's the twist most people don't expect. Predators didn't ignore sleeping humans out of some kind of instinctive respect or fear. In many documented cases throughout history, and even in parts of the world today, predators have attacked sleeping humans, particularly lone individuals in exposed locations. So the premise needs a correction before it can be properly explained. The real question isn't why predators never touch sleeping humans. It's why, for most of human history, in most situations, sleeping humans survived the night far more often than you'd expect from a slow, blind, defenseless primate lying still in the dark. And that answer isn't about predators at all. It's about what your ancestors built around themselves before closing their eyes. Begin with fire, because nothing changed the nighttime equation more than this. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham, whose work on cooking you may already know, also studied fire's role in human sleep and safety. Controlled fire, once mastered, didn't just cook food, it transformed the night itself into something survivable. Most large predators, including lions, leopards, and wolves, share a deep instinctive wariness of fire. Not because they reason about it, because bright flickering, unpredictable light and heat trigger an automatic avoidance response wired deep into their nervous systems, shaped by millions of years of evolution long before humans existed. A fire at the edge of a sleeping group did something remarkable. It created a boundary, not an impenetrable wall, but a strong deterrent, one that shifted the odds significantly in favor of the sleepers inside it. This alone reshaped nighttime survival. But fire was only the first layer. The second layer involves something you might not expect: how humans actually sleep compared to almost every other primate on Earth. Sleep researcher Carol Worthman, an anthropologist who has spent decades studying sleep across different cultures and species, found something fascinating when comparing human sleep patterns to those of other primates. Most primates, including chimpanzees and gorillas, sleep for shorter, more fragmented periods, often waking frequently throughout the night, staying semi-alert to environmental threats. Humans, by contrast, evolved unusually consolidated sleep, longer, deeper, more continuous blocks of rest, typically concentrated into a single nighttime period rather than scattered throughout the day and night. At first glance, this seems like a strange evolutionary choice. Wouldn't staying alert longer, sleeping lighter, waking more often, be the safer option? Here's where the picture gets more interesting. Worthman's research suggests that humans compensated for this deeper, more vulnerable sleep by relying on something almost no other primate uses to the same extent: the group itself and the physical safety of a shared sleeping space. Instead of each individual staying partially alert all night, early humans appear to have shifted the burden of vigilance outward, onto fire, onto shelter, and onto the group. Which brings you to the third layer, arguably the most important one of all. Researcher David Sampson, a sleep scientist who has directly studied modern hunter-gatherer societies like the Hadza of Tanzania, made an important discovery about how these communities structure their nights. Rather than everyone sleeping deeply at the exact same time, sleep within Hadza camps tends to be naturally staggered. At almost any given point during the night, Sampson's research found at least one person in the camp is awake or in a lighter stage of sleep. This wasn't an assigned guard duty, like a formal night watch. It emerged naturally from differences in individual sleep timing and biological rhythm. Some people are naturally inclined to fall asleep earlier and wake earlier. Others stay up later and wake later. When you layer these different sleep schedules across an entire group, gaps in vigilance shrink dramatically, almost by accident. Sampson referred to this as a kind of built-in sentinel behavior, a rotating unintentional watch system created simply by natural variation in human sleep timing. Isn't it strange to think your body's sleep schedule might not just be personal preference, but part of an ancient group security system? This detail alone reframes something many people assume about sleep disorders in the modern world. Struggling to fall asleep at the normal time or waking up in the middle of the night for no clear reason might not always be a malfunction. In some cases, it may be an echo of exactly the kind of biological diversity that once kept ancestral camps safer through the night. Now combine all three layers together. Fire discouraged predators at the environmental level. Group sleeping created safety in numbers since predators overwhelmingly prefer isolated, vulnerable targets over defended groups. And staggered individual sleep timing created a rolling, informal watch with someone almost always semi-alert, even without anyone consciously organizing it. This is why the premise needed correcting earlier. Predators weren't ignoring sleeping humans because of some special instinct. Sleeping humans, protected by fire, by numbers, and by staggered vigilance, simply became a much harder, much riskier target than a lone, unprotected individual. But even this layered explanation misses something deeper, something that goes beyond behavior and reaches into the architecture of your brain itself. Here comes the counterintuitive twist. Sleep researcher Jerome Siegel, who has studied sleep patterns across a wide range of species, including several traditional societies with little exposure to modern technology, found something that challenges a common assumption about ancestral sleep. Many people picture early humans as constantly on edge at night, sleeping lightly out of necessity. But Siegel's cross-cultural research suggests that even in societies with genuine present predator risk, deep sleep still dominates most of the night for most individuals. In other words, your ancestors weren't lying awake in fear every single night. For most sleepers, most of the time, sleep was deep and largely undisturbed, protected by the surrounding system rather than by constant personal alertness. This matters because it flips a common assumption. Safety wasn't achieved primarily through individual awareness. It was achieved through environmental and social engineering. Fire, shelter, group structure, so that any single sleeper could actually experience deep, restorative, undisturbed rest while the system as a whole stayed defended. This is a profound shift in perspective. Your ancestors didn't survive the night by fighting exhaustion and staying half awake in fear. They survived by building conditions safe enough that deep, vulnerable, fully unconscious sleep became possible at all. Sleep itself, then, wasn't simply tolerated despite the danger. It was something ancestral humans actively protected, because the biological benefits of deep sleep, memory consolidation, physical repair, immune system regulation were valuable enough to be worth defending with fire, shelter, and social structure. There's another layer worth mentioning here, one connected to something researchers call predation risk allocation, studied extensively by biologist Charles Nunn, who has examined sleep and disease and safety trade-offs across numerous primate and mammal species. Nunn's research suggests that animals, including early humans, tend to shift their sleeping locations and behaviors based on perceived risk levels in a given environment. Higher risk environments, more exposed terrain, more predator activity, correlate with lighter, more fragmented sleep and more selective sleeping site choices. Often elevated, enclosed, or heavily defended. This means early human sleep wasn't one fixed universal pattern. It was flexible, responsive, constantly recalibrated based on the specific dangers of a specific place and time. A group camping in a predator-dense region behaved very differently at night than a group in a safer, more open environment, adjusting fire size, group spacing, and shelter structure accordingly. Your ancestors, in other words, weren't passively hoping predators would leave them alone. They were actively engineering the odds in their favor, using every tool available: fire, numbers, shelter, and the strange natural gift of staggered sleep timing across individuals. Now, here's where this ancient system becomes genuinely strange, almost eerie, when you look closely at it. Some researchers studying evolutionary psychology have proposed that a portion of common human fears around darkness and nighttime vulnerability may be a kind of inherited alarm system, a lingering psychological residue from this exact evolutionary pressure. The mild unease many people feel walking through a dark, unfamiliar space, the instinct to want a light on, the discomfort of sleeping completely alone in an unfamiliar, unprotected location. These reactions may not be irrational modern anxieties at all. They may be extremely old survival responses, tuned across hundreds of thousands of years, still firing in a world that for most people today no longer contains large nighttime predators at all. Doesn't it feel strange that your brain might still be running ancient nighttime security software? Long after the original threat mostly disappeared. This is where the modern mirror comes into focus, and it's more relevant to your daily life than you might expect. Think about your own instinctive nighttime habits, the way certain hotel rooms feel unsettling until you check that the door is locked, the comfort of a nightlight even as an adult in an unfamiliar space. The specific, almost universal discomfort many people report when camping completely alone compared to camping in a group, even when the objective danger level is statistically similar. These aren't random quirks. They're consistent with exactly the ancestral system described here: fire as safety, numbers as safety alertness distributed rather than carried alone. Even something as ordinary as a security camera, a porch light left on overnight, or the low hum of city streetlights serves the same fundamental psychological function fire once served for your ancestors, reducing the felt vulnerability of unconsciousness in the dark. Modern sleep science has continued to explore this connection. Researchers studying what's sometimes called first night effect, a well-documented phenomenon where people sleep noticeably lighter and more fragmented during their very first night in an unfamiliar location, have found that one side of the brain appears to stay more vigilant than the other during that first night, essentially keeping a partial watch, even in a modern hotel room with locked doors and no predators anywhere nearby. This has been studied directly by sleep researchers using brain imaging, showing measurably asymmetric brain activity, one hemisphere sleeping more lightly than the other, specifically during a person's first night in a new environment. It fades after that first night, once the environment starts to feel familiar and presumably safe. Isn't that remarkable? Somewhere inside your modern, technologically secure sleeping brain, a small piece of ancestral sentinel behavior still quietly activates, checking the unfamiliar room the way your ancestors once checked an unfamiliar campsite, before finally allowing itself to fully rest. So bring this all the way back to where it started. That camping trip, tent zipped, forest humming outside. You didn't survive the night because the predators of that landscape respected you or avoided you out of instinct. You survived because an ancient layered system built across hundreds of thousands of years was quietly working in your favor. Maybe there was a fire nearby. Maybe there were other people in nearby tents, creating exactly the kind of group safety your ancestors relied on. Maybe your own sleep schedule shifted slightly compared to a companion's, creating exactly the kind of staggered, accidental vigilance that once protected entire ancestral camps. And even the mild uneasiness you might have felt zipping that tent closed, checking it twice, listening a little longer than necessary before finally drifting off, that wasn't irrational anxiety. That was inheritance, an old, quiet alarm system, still running, still checking the dark, long after most of the danger it was built for has faded from the world. You fall asleep on a camping trip, tent zipped, forest humming around you, and somewhere out there, something with claws and a nose built for smelling blood from a mile away is awake. But you sleep anyway, deeply, safely, protected by a system your ancestors built, one fire, one group, one staggered watch at a time, long before you ever knew it existed.